Secretary of the branch, C. Anil Pal, and today's resource person, C. Hardik Modh, Ahmedabad. Past chairman of the branch, senior professional colleagues, MC members, and my dear professional colleagues, good evening to all of you and welcome you all. We are fortunate to get today's resource person, C. Hardik Modh, to our branch as his very busy personality. We are grateful to you, sir. We welcome you once again for today's virtual seminar. My dear members, in any administration, the provisions for the inspection, search and seizure and arrest are provided to protect the interest of the genuine taxpayers, as the tax evaders, by evading the tax, get an unfair advantage over the genuine taxpayers. And as a deterrent for tax evasion, these provisions are also required to safeguard the government's legitimate dues. Thus, these provisions act as a deterrent, and by checking evasion, provide a level playing field to genuine taxpayers. It may be mentioned that the option of the inspection, search, seizure, and arrest are exercised only in exceptional circumstances and as a last resort to protect the government revenue. Therefore, to ensure that these provisions are used properly, effectively, and the rights of the taxpayers are also protected. It is stipulated that the inspection, search, or seizure can only be carried out when an officer of the rank of the Joint Commissioner or above has reasons to believe the existence of such exceptional circumstances. In such cases, the Joint Commissioner may authorize in writing any officer to cause the inspection, search and seizure. However, in case of arrest, the same can be carried out only where the person is accused of the offences specified for these purposes and the tax amount involved is more than the specified limit. Further, the arrest under the GST Act can be made only by authorization of the Commissioner. These circumstances which may warrant the exercise of these options are as follows. Inspection, and inspection can be different from the search and seizure also, because all these things and as a last resort, I explained you for detailed explanation and for full deliberation. Today with us, CA Hardik Modh from Ahmedabad with us. So we are grateful and thankful to you, sir. So for detailed deliberations and for the benefit of the members and a clear understanding of the concept of these things under the GST Act, that he is the right person, so that we have chosen to him today's conference. Now, with these brief particulars, now I request Andhar Sridhar Garu to introduce today's speaker to the August gathering.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your reference.
Good evening, dear members. Welcome you all to the second day of the legal SAPTAH, Insights, Inspection, Search and Seizure and Arrest under GST by CA Hardik Praveen by Modi ji. CA Hardik Praveen Modh is an advocate. Modh, he is advocate and partner of economic class practice with Messrs. R.V. Desai. He has completed his LLB in 2001 and chartered accountants in 2002. He immediately after completion of CA branched out to litigation area of the practice. He practiced in Mumbai since August 2002 with Messrs. R.V. Desai as senior advocate till March 2003. Thereafter, associated with Sri Vikram S. Nankani, a senior advocate practicing in commercial litigation in Mumbai for the period from April 2003 to December 2004. Started practice in Ahmedabad since Jan 2005. Working as partner in economic class practice, having offices at Mumbai, Delhi, Ahmedabad, Pune, and Bengaluru, and Chennai, and having strength of more than 250 lawyers. He is a member of Bar Council of Gujarat and have been practicing since 2002 and appeared before various high courts, Supreme Court, and various forums across the country. He is handling various cases related to GST, Customs Act, Central Excise Act, Finance Act 1994, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, company law matters, arbitration matters, and white collar offense, etc., so on and so forth. He is doing court advisory and litigation practice which starts from hand drafting reply to show cause notice to appearing in High Court across India and Supreme Court. He is a regular speaker at various associations and institutions. With these few words, I introduce the honorable speaker to the August Gallery. Over to the speaker, C.A. Hardik Modh.
Sir, Hardik Modh garu, now you can take up the class.
Yes. Thank you to both of you. First, Chairman Sir, Mr. G. Vasudev Murthy Ji, Secretary Ji, past President, and all the senior members as well as colleagues and friends. I would like to thank to this association for inviting me to speak on my favorite subject, that is called inspection, search and seizure, as well as the arrest provisions. And specifically, you know that now this is the area where we require to dwell into it. You are aware that a recent incident happened in Gurgaon, where 2 chartered accountants were arrested. Today, I've been told that their bail applications have been rejected. No doubt, we know that ultimately magistrate, in normal cases, they reject the bail application because there are many reasons. One of the reasons is because in GST, the stake is high. 2, it is new for the magistrate, because many times we see that in magistrate, small cases come like theft, 500 rupees, 10,000 rupees, something. And when they see that the case involved in the matter is more than crores of rupees, because there is a threshold limit of 5 crore, where thereafter only the officer has a power to arrest. Otherwise, there is no requirement to arrest the person in case where the offense for the amount is below rupees 5 crores. So many times magistrate is scared to see this amount, and they normally don't grant the bail. They really forget the concept in which situation the bail should be granted. But yes, nonetheless, we have always hope with a higher forum like Sessions Court and the High Court, where normally the chances to get the bail is always high. So today, let me I've just decided that I'll take you first on this search, seizure, as well as inspection, and thereafter we deal with this arrest provision and then the prosecutions. So this is the area, and I'm happy to deal with the questions. Whether you would like to share it in between or at the end of my session, I'm happy to deal with all these cases. So before begin, I would like to share the screen. I wish that you can see that. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir. No problem.
Okay. So you know that in every law, whether you take GST, whether you take customs, earlier it was excise and service tax, the power has been given to officers for purpose of inspections as well as search, seizure, and the arrest also. And when we talk about the power, no doubt power always comes with the responsibilities. Many times officers act judicially, and many times they exercise this power excessively, and that creates the problem for both government as well as the assessee. And why this inspection, search and seizures are required? For the reason that today also, if you see the revenue wise, government gets almost 70 to 80% revenue out of this tax, And when I talk about the tax, it includes both direct tax as well as the indirect tax. You can see the screen, even for last 3 years, the collection from the tax would be approximately 80 to 85%. And therefore, the government would always like to see that there would not be revenue leakage. Two, the scrupulous person would not get undue benefit out of it, because over the period of time, government started putting trust over the assessee. When this law, indirect tax law, was introduced, and specifically under the regime of excise and before the moderate scheme came, who are old practitioners, they know that ultimately inspector used to sit at the factory. They used to see that when the invoice has been issued, invoice has been raised, the officer used to make endorsement over it. That time when even the truck was required to be clear from the factory, the officer come visit to the factory, they would examine, and thereafter goods were allowed to be clear from the factory. That was called as an inspector Raj at the relevant time. Over the period of time, the government realized that now we need to put trust over this assessee, and therefore they started the system of a self-assessment. They say that we will now trust on the assessee, let them clear the goods as per their own wishes, as per their own valuation, and the mechanism has been given. So when the discretion was given, or when the power has been given to assessee, they also put the responsibilities, and the responsibility is very harsh. So, and why even over the period of time, earlier when law was introducing the excise, the power was that even though there is a small case of evasion, the power was given, the assessee was arrested. But gradually government realized that no, because of this, many times even there is no fault of the manufacturers or service providers, but they succumb because of the non-understanding of the law properly, some contraventions, whether malified or non-malified intention. And thereafter, over the period of time, they increase the monetary limit. That yes, if there is an offense of particular amount, then the person should be arrested, or without that, he should not be arrested. Secondly, that inspection is required, that investigation is required, because of nowadays you see the business model is not now traditional business model. Earlier, the business model was that okay, when you raise the bill, when you clear the goods, you raise the bill. There is simplicity. Nowadays, you purchase goods from X state, clear to Y state, invoice is raised from the Z state. Secondly, many times, even though the goods are in the form of intangible, without physically transfer the goods, the invoices are raised or goods are moved electronically. So there are different types of nowadays a model, and even I tell you that officers are not aware about the many times the business model also, and therefore they started taking a consultancy from the chartered accountants or experts to understand the business model. If you see sometimes the transactions involve the goods and services, even there is a involvement of intangible goods also, trademark, copyrights, all type of services are involved in that. So it's a mix of transactions. Now, mix of transactions again, there is a different scenario of the taxes. So to understand this broadly, the government introduced that late, ultimately, no doubt, assessee would explain this. But simultaneously, our officers also required to be equipped with this system, and therefore, from time to time, they have introduced the various system to at least come out of this type of situation where they understand the business well, understand industry well. Like there are also models of digitalization of process, resulting simultaneous execution of various steps from the entire business process, like bank. If you see the banking business, insurance business, so there are various type of businesses, and therefore the government required that there should be some mechanism should be introduced in case where they find that there is a revenue leakage. You know that there are two boards for direct tax. There is a central board of direct taxes. In the case of the indirect taxes, there is a central board of earlier central board of excise and customs. Now it is called as a CBEC, a Central Board of the CBIG, Central Board of Indirect Tax and Customs, CBIC. So these are two boards have been there are two boards. They share the data periodically, and the latest example I may say that many assessors receive the so-called notices or the summons from the GST department in respect of the past transaction prior to 2017. Those transactions are related to them. They find that there is a mismatch between the service tax returns filed by the assessee vis-a-vis income tax returns. All this data, because this income tax department, they shared this data with the service tax department. Now it is a central tax department. They compare the data and they ask these informations. And this has happened because of there is a coordination between the two boards, Central Board of Direct Taxes as well as the Indirect Taxes. And therefore, I'm sure that because we are practicing on this side, whenever we always try to correlate income tax data nowadays with the GST data, we always see that there should not be mismatch between this data. Otherwise, there will be the chances that the investigation may be initiated by the department, whether it is in the form of audit, whether it is in the form of inspection, or whether in the form of the search. Depend on the volume, depend on the transactions. Next is that you have seen the nowadays what is the trend of the investigations, and specifically when March comes, when we are closer to March, you see that there are various type of the pressures, there are various type of investigations, and when we see the investigation, it starts from the inspections. We'll deal with the section 67(1), how the inspection starts and what is the mechanism for that, when it is can be called that it is a proper inspection, in when situation we can say it is illegal or illegitimate inspections. But in respect of the when the normally inspection starts by issuance of the summons. And I've seen in indirect taxes, whenever the summons is issued, they call either first they call the authorized signatory. Many times when there is a small organization, they immediately issue the summon with name of like director or partners. They call for all the informations. After information, they find that yes, there is requirement to deal in the transaction. They even search the premises. They seize the critical documents, including servers, mobiles, and everything. Based on that, they put the pressurize over the assessee for deposit of the amount even before the so-called notice is issued. If you don't cooperate with the department, and when I say cooperation with the department means if you have not shown the willingness to deposit the amount, that time they would treat you for arrest, because ultimately they always see that the best weapon to collect the money, to collect the amount for government is nothing but the arrest provisions. And this is not happening now. It has been going for years, that ultimately, since in arrest provision is there, assessee knows that if we don't deposit this amount, then I will be arrested. And the officer always use this weapon for a recovery of this amount. Whether it is legitimate, illegitimate, that would be decided later on. And in India, we know that first person will be arrested and then trial starts. In developed countries, normally, first there will be trial, there is a conviction, and thereafter person is arrested. So it's a absolutely reverse mechanism in India, specifically in respect of this type of cases. And thereafter, when all this the arrest is done, everything is done, thereafter the adjudication will start, and then the whatever the consequences, whether the amount will be confirmed, decided, drop, that will be done later on. So this is the recent trend going on in the market. Now, one more agency, I'm sure you are aware about that, there is an agency called DGGI, Director General of Goods and Service Tax. The DGGI they are like as a parallel to DRI, that means Director of Revenue Intelligence Department. Similarly, Enforcement Department, they are parallel to this investigating department, and they have the highest authority of the investigations. They have been empowered to investigate the case across the India. Because if you see, the Central Tax Authority has a jurisdiction limited to the place where the assessee is located. Similarly, state has also limited jurisdiction. But DGGI has been empowered to investigate the case across the India. And therefore, in many cases, when the state department or the central department finds that these transactions are not only limited to their jurisdiction, but they require to go beyond the state jurisdiction, or be required to go beyond that central jurisdiction, in that situation, they transfer this case to DGGI. In GST, you are aware that ultimately assessee has been assigned either with the central authority or with the state authority. There is no any mechanism specified that yes, if the assessee has a business across the India, then let the state authority, central authority is given the authority or is the jurisdictional officer, or vice versa. If the assessee has only the limited business, let the state authority would be the appropriate authority for them. That is not the case. And as I aware that because when this GST law was introduced earlier, who was registered under the excise and service tax, they had been transferred to the state central authority. And in case where the person was registered with the VAT authority, they were transferred to the state authority. And once the jurisdictional officer is decided whether it is a central or state, they are governed, the assessee is governed under that jurisdiction only. No doubt DGGI has no role over it. Now, what is the function of the DGGI? The main function that to ascertain the modus operandi being operated by various scrupulous persons to unearth the evasion of the tax. When in many times it is even a non-evasion case also, like regarding the classification of the goods, they find that yes, that ultimately across the industry, the assessee classify, take an example that the farsan or particular toy or particular utensil under particular heading, but it is a wrong classification. It should be classifiable under the Y. So take an example, suppose if any state authority come to know about this type of case, even though he sends this communication to the entire authorities across the India, people would not take it seriously. Even though state authority informed to the highest officer of his department, to commissioner, and commissioner in turns informed to all the state authorities across the state, it would not be taken, this case would not be taken as a serious. But if DGGI officer is there and he sends this information to entire commissionerate of the country, people would take seriously, because they know that if I ignore this instruction, there will be consequences of it. And therefore, DGGI, the role has been role has been given to DGGI to collect the informations and to ascertain where is the evasion of the tax. Similarly, they also ascertain the modus operandi being operated by different type of scrupulous persons. They also, their role is also to coordination with the different type of the investigating authorities. Take an example of DRI, Income Tax Department, Enforcement Department, or various type of agencies. And they also see that whatever the work has been entrusted by the ministry in respect of the particular transaction, they will have to look into this type of transactions. And all these functions have been given by the board to DGGI to see that whether they act it absolutely in proper way or not. While introducing this GST, as I said that various assessees have been assigned to central also as well as state. Issue arose that suppose if I've been assigned, particular assessee is assigned by to the state authority, and during the course of investigation, central authority finds that yes, this particular assessee has done some malpractice, or there is some evasion of the case, or there is a misclassification of the goods, or there is a misdeclared value of the goods. Whether central has a power to adjudicate the matter or to investigate the matter or not. And why I'm saying, because earlier, before introduction of GST, if particular state has a jurisdiction over the assessee, other state would not encroach, would not come and investigate the case. Similarly, if in central also, if particular central department, like take an example of Ahmedabad in Gujarat, he is a commissionerate over the one particular assessee, then outside place of the city of Ahmedabad, other officer would not come and investigate the case. No doubt DGJ had a power, earlier DGCEI had a power and they could do it, but state was not given the power. Similarly, central was not given the power, and the government realized that yes, it is going to be happen, because even the federal state, even though we are making one law GST, but we are making separate authorities, like state authorities, central authority. Even central authority is the one authority across the India, but there is a central authority which is located state-wise, and to overcome of that, they decided that they introduced the section 6, and in section 6 they say that if subject matter has been examined by the state authority or Union Territory authority, then central would not have power to examine that case. Now, what is meaning of case? They say the subject matter of the case. What is the subject matter? It has not been defined under the law. Nowhere it has been defined what is meaning of subject matter. Similarly, subject matter is not defined under the General Clauses Act. But the way it has been interpreted by the courts, they say the subject matter includes the cause of actions in the relief claim. Now, what is meaning of cause of actions? Because this cause of action is very familiar word in the litigations. But while we are dealing with the chartered accountancy, cause of action, we know that yes, cause of action means something happened. It is a very restricted meaning. The cause of action, how the court has interpreted, is that cause of action has to be read along with the prayer sought in the particular claim or particular case. I give you example that the CGST authority started investigation to particular assessee. They investigated the case related to eligibility of the credit, because they purchased the goods from one particular unit. They found that yes, that units only supplied the invoices, did not examine and did not receive the goods. At that time, the central called for all the documents, their purchase sales invoices, their electronic credit ledgers, their returns, everything. And thereafter, the authority concluded positively, yes, you have legitimately availed the ITC. After some time, state authority also learned that yes, that particular assessee who had been examined earlier by the central wrongly availed ITC on the construction as well as the works contract services. The issue arises whether state can examine the issue again, which has been already examined by the central or not. So I may say in this way that when earlier central examined the issue, no doubt they call for all the documents, including electronic credit ledger, purchase sales, everything. But the focus was only that whether the assessee legitimately avail the credit based on the invoices issued by so-called fake supplier or not. While the state authority is examining the case, he is examining that whether the credit per se or ITC per se availed by them has been correctly availed in terms of the provisions of the CGST Act or SGST Act or not. So here there is a different cause of action, and therefore, according to me, both the authority have right to examine that case or right to have had correctly examined the case. One issue arose, that is in the case of Indo International Tobacco Limited. This is a very interesting case because in Ahmedabad we dealt with this case related to one of the buyer. The case, this Indo International Tobacco, the case was that they only supplied the material, they supplied the only invoices without supply of the materials. This company had is located in Delhi. Simultaneously, they have also branches across the different places. Because of the sensitive products, many times the state authority, central authority, they examine their books of account and everyone has given the clean check to them. In Ahmedabad, one of our clients did not get the refund on the material purchased from SSM Traders, who is also one of the party in this Indo International Tobacco Limited. They approached to High Court by saying that the department is not granting the refund. This assessee was, my client was located in Ahmedabad, and his jurisdictional officer was the state jurisdictional officers. When we filed the petition, they say that no, there's some investigation has been going against this supplier, and therefore we are not granting the refund. Now later on we realized that ultimately DGGI Ahmedabad started investigation because the refund application, because we filed this petition in the Gujarat High Court. The state authority did not have the jurisdiction, and therefore they asked DGGI to investigate this case. And therefore, this Indo International approached before the Delhi High Court, and they say that, see, all this central and state, they have in some of that authority already examined my case. They gave me clean sheet. 2 or 3 departments still examining the case, and state in Ahmedabad is also examining the case, and therefore DGGI has no jurisdiction to examine this case. While pending the petition, the reply was filed by each of the authority, because they were also made party to the petition. Interestingly, everyone had given no objection. If DGGI carries on the investigation, they said, okay, we'll hand over this entire investigation to DGGI. We have no objection for that. The Delhi High Court says that Section 6 would not be applicable in the particular case, because Section 6 would be applicable on a case where the central or state authority examine the case, then another authority would not again investigate the same case, because there will be the subject matter of the subject matter would be the same. But here, even though central and state is examining the case, but DGGI step in, and all this, both the authorities, central and state, they gave up their claim and they said, let the DGGI examine this case. So nothing is wrong in this. And ultimately, Delhi High Court said that Section 6 is not applicable. It is not made for such type of cases, because there are many limitations to the central and state. But DGGI being a central authority having jurisdiction across the India, and other authorities have already handed over this case to DGGI, and therefore DGGI can go ahead with the investigations. And therefore, I may say in 2 ways. One, Section 6 is applicable, no doubt, but it is applicable only in a case where the subject matter is a common or is the same. Subject matter is a very wide meaning. You have to just compare apple to apple. If there is no comparison, or if it is found that later authority has expanded their investigation, then I may say that Section 6 would not be applicable. Both authority can examine the case. In Gujarat, in past, it happened that state started investigation simultaneously, central also started investigation. Both authorities simultaneously started investigation. Assessee approached the High Court, and then High Court said that, okay, now we can see that both the authorities are there, central and state. You decide, let the authority decides who wants to investigate the case to reduce the multiplicity of the proceedings. That is the whole aspect of it. So it depends the circumstances, situation, and the subject matter. Next is regarding the jurisdiction of this DGGI. Just before I go on this DGGI jurisdiction, let we understand regarding one latest decision. No doubt, latest means is a 4 or 5 months before. Canon India Limited, I'm sure who are practicing on indirect tax, specifically on customs side, is aware about the decision of this Canon India Limited. It is a case of jurisdiction of DRI, whether the DRI is a jurisdiction to investigate the case or not, and the issues of the so-called notice or not. It is a case where Canon India imported the material. The assessing officer examined the material, allowed the clearance of the goods. Later on, Directorate of Revenue Intelligence initiated the investigation and booked the case of the valuation. The matter went up to the Supreme Court. The issue took up regarding jurisdiction of the DRI, because it was argued that DRI is not a proper officer to issue the so-called notice, because Section 28 of the Customs Act empower only the proper officer for issuance of the notice. DRI is not a proper officer, because proper officer as defined in the Customs Act means the custom officer who has been provided list of custom officers under Section 3 of the Act. And in case if the government wants to notify other officer as a custom officer, then there should be proper notification under 6 of the Customs Act. Since no any proper notification was issued under Section 6, therefore the Supreme Court say that no, this DRI is not the proper officer, and ultimately so-called notice was quashed. Across India, many so-called notices were issued by Director of Revenue Intelligence. Various petitions was filed across the India. Later on last budget, the government came up with the amendment. No doubt the review petition is also filed in the Supreme Court, which is still pending and is coming for hearing on 19 July. But by taking that clue, the issue arose whether DGGI has a proper officer for issuance of the notice to carry out the investigation or not. This similar issue was taken up in the Gujarat High Court in the case of Yasho Industries Limited, wherein the Gujarat High Court said that the DGGI has a power to issue the notice, because if we read the Section 3 of the CGST Act vis-a-vis the SGST Act, DGGI is considered as GST officers. They says that the government has notified by of section under the Section 3 this officer as a proper officers. But at the relevant time, the notification number 14 of 2007, when it was introduced, 2017 when it was introduced, instead of the central government, the notification was issued by the board, Central Board of Indirect Tax and Customs, and therefore this petition was filed. During the pendency of this petition, government came with the corrigendum by saying that we wrongly mentioned the board in the preamble of that notification. Actually, this notification has been issued by the central government only. So, based on that corrigendum, the Gujarat High Court said that no, your case is now not like as a Canon India Limited. DGGI is a proper officer. Government has notified them, and therefore it is he is a proper officer, and the petition has been dismissed. And similarly, in the case of Madras High Court, in the Chhattisgarh High Court, in the case of Sri Ravi Agarwal, similar issue arose, and based on the corrigendum, they said that yes, ultimately the DGGI is the proper officer. And either of these cases taken up, neither of these cases taken up before the Supreme Court, and therefore today DGGI is the proper officer to investigate the case. Now, we, in respect of search, seizure, and inspections, you know that as a chairman sir said that is a very strict actions, and therefore it is required to be taken up with a care. Ultimately, it is also required to be looked into it that yes, the liberty of a person should not be infringed. because of this action of the officers. And therefore, time and again, from decades, it says that in which situations search can be called, yes, is a legitimate search, and when it can be called is a illegitimate or illegal search. It is also mentioned that by the chairman that ultimately, yes, the purpose for introduction of this search and seizure is to find out tax evader, so that ultimately they would not get undue benefit over a genuine taxpayers, because genuine taxpayers pay the tax and they follow the rules and regulations. Simultaneously, similarly, if they have to, it is also required to be looked by the government that yes, evaders should not get a benefit of it, and ultimately there should be level playing field for everyone, and therefore these procedures for search, seizure, and inspections has been introduced. Under this GST, whether inspection can be taken off or carry on, or the search or seizure, the power has been given to the Joint Commissioner for issue for authorizations. If the authorization has been given by any officer below the rank of Joint Commissioner, then it is not considered as a proper search, or it is search per se can be said it is a non-asked search. That is one angle. And two is a reason to believe. So these are the two important aspects in search and seizure. First is the person who issued the authorization should be the competent authority. And two is a very serious action, stringent actions. It affects the fundamental right of the assessee. It also infringes the personal liberty of the assessee. And therefore, care has to be taken. And therefore, the power has been given to the higher officers. And only this higher officer can exercise this power only if he has reason to believe that yes, this person has evaded the tax with intention to malafide it. Otherwise, if search is not issued, authorization is not issued by the proper officer, or there is a lacunine reason to believe, in that situation, it cannot be permitted to carry out either inspection or search and seizure. Now we have to elaborate these meanings. What is meaning of the reason to believe? So, reason to believe is correlated with the instances. So, officer if believes it, or joint commissioner higher than the joint commissioner, yes, particular assessee has evaded tax or he contravened the provision of the law. He has a two power. Either he can go for inspection or he can go for search. If the officer wants to go for inspection, then he has to exercise the power under section 67 subsection 1. And if he believes that yes, here this person is an evader and required to carry out the search, then he has to exercise power under section 67(2). Now, the idea both aspects are different, because when he carry out the inspection, the officer is not given power to seize the stocks. The power has been given only under the search. And therefore, when the assessing officer go for inspection, and if he wants to convert this inspection into the search, there is another authorization required. And many times we have come across many cases where the officer has not distinguished the difference between inspection and the search. And according to why it is happened, because there is a one common form, prescribed common form for inspection as well as the search. There is a one common section for search and inspection, and therefore this happened, and hence it is an obligation upon the assessee that when the officer comes, we have to examine whether he has come for inspection or whether he has come for the search. And if he has come for the inspection, then ultimately the power is limited, and then we can definitely tell him that yes, you have come for inspection, your power is so and so. If they want to convert into search, no doubt they can convert it, but it requires proper authorization for that. Now, in which situation the assessing officer or proper officer can carry out the inspections? When they find that assessee or officers or judicial officer finds that any particular transaction of supply of goods or services has been suppressed by him for evasion of the tax, or they suppress the stock in hand, or they excessively avail the credit which is not legitimately otherwise eligible, or they provide contravene the provision of the tax. In that situation, the inspection can be carried out. Now, this is applicable for the supply of the goods or services. But there are transporters, there are warehouse keepers, godown keepers, or a person who keeps the who stores the goods on behalf of the other persons. Now, in that situation, also the inspection can be carried out. But if the officer has a reason to believe that these either the warehouse keepers or transporter or storage keepers, they are running in such a manner that ultimately it is going to add a loss to the exchequers. In those situations, the inspection can be carried out. Now, inspection can be carried out only on two factors. One, the joint commissioner has a reason to believe, or any officer above the joint commissioner has a reason to believe that yes, ultimately these are the ingredients for that the inspection is required to be carried out. When they carry out these inspections, so how the inspection to be carried out? One, to visit the place of business, because if you read the section 67(1), it says that inspection can be carried out at the place of business. Now, place of business has been defined under the law. Place of business means where the person is registered for a particular place, or he keeps the books of account. So if your assessee keeps the book of account at the home or at residence, that is also called as a place of business. If you carry out activity any place other than the registered place of business, that is also called as a place of business. And therefore, the place of business is a very wide term which has been defined in the law. Two, it includes even residence also, if you maintain the books of account at your residence place. But take an example that he comes to your residence place. You are not maintaining books of account. Would you permit him to carry out inspection? Answer is no, because inspection can be carried out only at the place of business. And if you are not maintaining your books of account at your place, or you are not keeping your stocks at the residence place, they are not permitted. I'm sure the question comes up in mind that without examination, without inspection by the officer, how would they come to know whether we have maintained the books of account at residence or not? So it's a catch 22 positions. Because if they come to your place, they make panchnama, and after panchnama, they did not find anything, you can very well challenge this action in the court by saying that the inspection was invalid. Even though it is a residence place, law does not permit them to inspect my residence place, and then also came, and therefore kindly treat this inspection is bad in law. So this is a place where this is the thing we have to keep in mind. Now, once the person come for inspection, what is the power available with them? And as I said that yes, inspection can be converted into the search. And when they want to convert into the search, they can convert the search only in two cases. One, when they know that some goods are lying into the place of business, which is unaccounted or which is liable for confiscation under section 130 of the Act. That is one. Two, when officer finds that they kept some books of account, things, items, documents at a secreted place. In that situation, they can convert inspection into the search. I again repeat it, because unless and until these circumstances are not arisen, the officer does not have power to convert inspection from inspection into search. One, no goods are lying at your place, which are liable for confiscation under section 130. That is one. Two, the officer does not have any documents or information that any item, things, documents, or books of account have been secreted in any other place, then they don't have power to convert the inspection into the search. Once they exercise the power of the search, obligation upon the assessee is to look into the authorizations. Two, once the authorization is proper, then yes, officer can seize the documents, goods or things, because as I said that 130 is for the purpose of the seizure, for the purpose of carry out to see that yes, there is an unaccounted which is liable for 130. So, and secondly, if they find that yes, the materials are available which are required to look into it, which is not in position to look into immediately at the office, and therefore they can seize these documents. Two, when they find that there are some almirah or some electronic devices where it is locked into the one locker, or it is in the lock premises, the officer has a power to break that lock and enter into the premises, or otherwise they can seal the premises. They call the police, they call the panchas, and thereafter in their presence they can break the lock, and thereafter they can carry out the further proceedings. After carrying out this process, whatever documents, what they seize it, and after investigation, after this examination of this document, they find that these documents are not required, then they can return this document. The documents are required to be returned actually within 30 days from the after issuance of the show cause notice. In case they find that these documents are required and they want to continue with it, they can keep those documents till the show cause notice is issued. In between period, if we find that these documents are very important, we means assessee finds that these assessee documents are very important for us, because of the carry out the audit, because of the filing the returns, or for XYZ reasons, they can ask for the copies. The officer is bound to give the copies of these documents unless the officer finds that yes, ultimately it prejudices to interest of the investigation of the revenue. In that situation, they can deny this furnishing document, or otherwise the documents is required to be furnished. The procedure as provided in the CRPC would be applicable in respect of the search and seizures. So under the CRPC, as I said that yes, ultimately how the documents can be seized, how the panchnama can be prepared, the procedure has been prescribed. The similar procedure would be applicable in the present case. If the goods have been seized, what the power is available, the assessee can ask for the provisional release of the goods, and the goods would be allowed to be released on execution of the bond as well as the furnishing the securities. Here, it is very interesting point that the assessing proper officer come to the premises, they seize the materials, and thereafter the investigation initiated. In investigation transactions, there is a huge liability. The issue arises whether the provisional release is applicable. When the provisional release is allowed, whether the bond and the bank guarantee is required to be furnished or security is required to be furnished, that is only limited to the goods which has been seized, or even they can go for the past transaction and ask for the security of the past transactions also. Because in one of our client, it happened, they were in the jewelry business, diamond and jewelry business. The officer searched the premises. They found that yes, some stocks are unaccounted. They seized this material. When we approached the authority for release of the goods on provisional basis, the authority not only demanded the security and bond for the seizure of the material, but they said that in past for last 2 years, you did transaction for so and so amount on which there is approximately of so and so amount is a GST liability. So unless until you secure that revenue also will not allow you to release of the goods. We approached the High Court by saying that ultimately, if you read section 67, subsection 6, it talks about the provisional release of the seized material. It further provides that what form of security and surety is required to be given. And for that, there is a rule 140 of CGST rules. It talks about that ultimately, whatever the security and surety is required, that is required to be given only for the seizure of the material and not for the past transactions. Gujarat High Court held in favor by saying that yes, ultimately, the bond for the full value which is required to be given as per the provision, that is only for the seizure of the material, and to cover up the tax, interest and penalty, that is only for the seizure of the material, that security is required to be given. That security either you can give in the form of cash or the bank guarantee. Department did not agree with this order, took up this matter before the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court also appealed the order of the Gujarat High Court, and by saying that yes, ultimately this provisional release of the goods, if this surety and security is required to be given, that is only for the provisional release of the goods and not for the past transaction. That for that purposes, SOCOS is to be issued separately, and it will be adjudicated by them separately. And once the amount of tax, interest and penalty is quantified, that can be examined separately, but it cannot be mixed up with the seizure of the material for provisional release of the goods of the seizure of the materials. There is one more provision under this section 67, especially for search, seizure, and inspection, that if material has been seized, in that situation, whether the officer can keep this material goods for indefinite period of time, answer is no. They have to complete the investigation within a period of 6 months from the date of the search or from the date of initiation of the investigation. If the investigation is not completed within a period of 6 months, then with the permission of the commissioner, the 6 months can be extended. So total period of time for investigation is not more than 1 year. And this is applicable in the case when the goods has been seized. But if seizure is not made, then yes, they have power. The investigating authority has a power to carry out the investigation subject to limitation provided in the section 73 and 78 for the issuance of the notice and for the adjudication of the case. But in a case where the goods has been seized, then the power for then the SOCOS is required to be issued within a period of 6 months. If the notice is not issued within a period of 6 months, vis-a-vis no extension has been sought, in that situation, the seizure of the material has to be returned to the person from whom the seizure has been made. And there are many decisions from the Supreme Court also, as well as the High Courts. They say that the 6 months is a very strict interpretations. 6 months has to be read strictly. If no SOCOS has been issued within a period of 6 months, then goods has to be released. In other words, if investigation is not over within a period of 6 months, the goods are required to be returned. Now, when the goods are required to be returned, that means at the relevant time, there is no requirement to furnish the bond. There is no requirement to furnish to the securities. It is outrightly in a simple form, the goods will be returned. Question arises, does it mean that the case will be over? Answer is no. It is only in respect of the seizure, the goods will be returned without surety and without security, but investigation still goes on. If the department finds later on, yes, the suppose that ultimately the notice is required to be issued for demanding the tax, they can very well demand the tax on this. Similarly, in the case of the perishable material, in case of the perishable material, there is a different angle. They don't require to wait for the 6 months. For the perishable material, the department can very well issue the notice. The department can very with this perishable material later on, because there is a particular notification has been issued that in which situation this particular provision is applicable. Just will deal with that provision later on. Now, in respect of search and seizure, the Central Board of Indirect Tax and Customs, they issued the guidelines, and this guidelines was issued on the 2nd February 2021. That which precautions has to be taken by the investigating authority, and that we have to be very careful. One, when any officers goes to any premises, one, he has to have the proper authorization with him. Two, only the particular premises which has been mentioned in the authorization has to be searched. Third, when officers enter into the premises, they have to give their identification to the assessees. In case they visit the places where ladies or women are involved or girls are there, ultimately the ladies officer should be there along with the team. 2 or more French witnesses should remain present throughout the search. Then person from whose custody any documents are seized may be allowed to make copies thereof and also extract therefrom, for which the suitable time and place also give them, so that they can ultimately come to the premises and take the photocopies of this or extract of it. Panchnama has to be drawn. Panchnama has to be drawn to provide the entire procedure, what is happened, what time they enter into premises, who were the witnesses, what did they examine, what they found it, what they are going to seize it, whether this after seizure of the material, whether they handed over to the assessee or they have taken with them. So entire story has to be narrated in the Panchnama. Each of the page of the Panchnama is to be signed by the Panchas as well as the person who remained present from the assessee side during this entire search. In case statement is recorded, then each of the person whose statement is recorded, that has to be signed on the each of the page. No doubt these officers are not considered as a police officer, and therefore it is considered as an evidence. We'll see this point at the time of when the statement portion comes up. But this statement, when the statement is signed, the officer has, the assessee has to be very careful while signing the document, and we'll deal that also situation portion later on. Now, if you just sum up this entire section 67, because this is only the section 67, it talks about the search, seizure, and the inspections. So, to whom the power has been given? If you see that commissioner and proper officer has been only empowered for carry out for providing extension of the search, because this is the highest officer, and therefore, as I said that when the goods have been seized, documents have been seized, the so-cause is to be issued within a period of the 6 months. In other words, inspection has to be finished within a period of 6 months. If the required extension, the extension has to be received from principal commissioner or commissioner of the central tax. Similarly, in case of the additional or joint commissioner, they have power to issue authorization for carry out inspection, to give the power to carry out the search and seizures. In case they don't want to give the copies of the document because it ultimately infringes to the right of the revenue, then they can very well deny that. That is also under the section 67 subsection 5, and prepare the stocks of the inventory as well as the document seized. That is also empowered to the additional or joint commissioner, and superintendent has been only empowered for seizure of the documents and retain the same under section 67(11) as well as for issuance of the summons. Otherwise, superintendent does not have been empowered to carry out any other procedure unless it has been authorized by the additional or joint commissioner. So this is the procedure in respect of the search and seizure. Now we have seen that yes, ultimately the reason to believe is a very important word for carry out the inspections, as well as the search and seizures. So what is meaning of reason to believe? The reason to believe is a self-satisfaction, or whether it required to be satisfied to the others also. That is one. Two, whether reason to believe has to be reduced in writing or not. That is also important aspect. Third, that ultimately if someone demands this copy, is it required that copy is required to be furnished or not? So this is aspect to be covered up under the reason to believe. I tell you that there are many decisions on this. The crux point is this: it is a self-satisfaction. So the officer has to satisfy himself. Yes, these are the reason for which inspection is required, or these are the reason for which search and seizure is required. This self-satisfaction is not an appealable, is not a quasi-judicial order. But if the assessee approach the court and they demand, they say that ultimately search was illegally carried out. They did not have any reason to carry out the search at my place. And if the court demands this copy of reason to believe, that yes, where you have recorded your reason to believe, then it is an obligation upon the officer to furnish that document, that these are the reason for which I ask or I authorize my officer to go for search or to go for inspections. So that is very important. Otherwise, this reason to believe not. One, is not required to be circulated to assessee. Two, it is not required to be satisfied to other. And third, it is required in the writing. The officer cannot say that ultimately I know that what is the reason to believe, that is in my mind, and therefore if required I can tell to the court. No, that is not. It is required to be reduced in the writing. It has to be in the file, and that is also required before initiation. We have come across a situation that ultimately search was carried out. There was no any note on what basis the officer has permitted the officer to carry out the search, and ultimately High Court or concerned court said that it is an illegal search, it is non as such, because where is the reason to believe? Because this is one of the link to carry out the search or the search or inspection. In absence of availability of this reason, it is considered as an illegal search. And therefore, in State Brothers, in the ITO versus State Brother, it is said that the reason to believe that statutory condition for excess of power to order for the search and seizure, that reason that reasons is required to be recorded and must issue authorization in favor of the designated person, because ultimately they have to, even that authorization, it has to satisfy, it has to be mentioned who are the officer going to be visited to particular place. It is not the like as a very big authorization, because if the authorization given like ABC would go no that way, but it's mentioned that the particular person with the particular designation, it has to be mentioned in the authorization. Then proper officer must exercise power of search strictly in accordance with the law, because it affects the right, privacy, and freedom of the taxpayers. So, see, this is very important, because when the search is carried out, you know that ultimately when search is carried out, you seize the asset, you seize the documents, you seize the you attach the privacy of the person, and therefore it is obligation upon the officer to act in accordance with the law. If law is silent, he should not act on it, because the power has been sourced from the law for the search and seizure. And when the power has been sourced, it is also obligation upon them to act which is mentioned in the law, because otherwise it is considered as a violation of Article 21, because you can't touch upon any privacy of any person, or you can't play with any liberty of the person. And therefore, in many times, court comes with a very strict manner. They even impose cost upon the officers. Even officers are also, many occasions, they have lost their job because of that touch the privacy or liberty of a person. And therefore, it is very obligation upon the officer when they act on the search. It will be in a stricto terms, in terms of the provisions of the law. And if ultimately officers, or if the court finds that yes, the action is a maliciously taken or power is exercised for collateral purposes, then that action has been struck down. And no doubt, if the power is bona fide and furtherance of the statutory duty, then ultimately court also saved them. There is another case of Mapset Tabs Private Limited. It is in the context of the customs, and they say that if action of search is carried out, action of the search will be struck down if reason to believe has been recorded after search and seizure. So it is very important, as I said earlier, that reason to believe has to be recorded prior to carry out the search, not after the search. And I'm sure that many times the situation arises because many times officers manipulate the documents later on. When the person approaches to the court, they manipulate the records and try to show that ultimately, yes, when the search was carried out, the documents were available, everything. But it is not the case, because when you see the files, everything is maintained in the file. And I'm sure that if someone manipulate, it will be easily caught. And judges' eyes always see that their eyes is so, they catch immediately what they want to see that. And therefore, ultimately, if something is manipulated, the officer has to bear the cost for that. Power of search and seizure does not affect only right of possession and enjoyment of property, but also privacy of the citizen, which has been guaranteed by Article 21. And any law interfering with the personal liberty must satisfy the following triple test. What is? One, the action which has been taken that is prescribed under the law. Two, it does not violate the fundamental right of the person under Article 19. And equality test. These three tests has to be satisfied. Then only that search can be considered as a legitimate search. Similarly, in case of the J. Shekhar, it is also on the similar line, that when the reason to believe is recorded, it should not be rubber stamp. The person has to apply his mind. But I said that, see, reason to believe whether right or wrong, that has to be examined from the point of view of the person who recorded it. It may be the situation that ultimately reasons which has been recorded that may be true for him, may not be true for court. Court may not look into it. If court finds that yes, there is a reasonable reason, then court says that okay, the criteria provided under one of the criteria provided for carry out the search or inspection has been satisfied. But it should not be in a mechanical manner. And when judicially reviewing such decision pursues such reason to believe, it must be apparent to the reviewing authority that officer has applied his mind to the material available on record to arrive at his reason to believe. Now, in indirect taxes also, there is a, while this GST was introduced, it is also provided the reason to believe how it has to be explained. Similarly, in the case of the Lakhwani Mevaldas, in the it is in the context of the income tax, the Supreme Court said that existence of belief can be challenged, but not the sufficiency of reason to believe. So what is meaning of that? The existence of belief. So your reason is to be recorded, that has to be challenged, but not the sufficiency, whether the reason is proper, sufficient or not sufficient, that cannot be challenged. So if there is no reason, you can very well challenge. If there is no any proper reason is provided, it can be challenged. But whether there is a sufficient reason or not, that can't be challenged. Then expression reason to believe does not mean purely subjective satisfaction on the part of the officer. And if the reason must be held in a good faith and not merely by a pretense, and reason for formation of belief must have a rational connection with or relevant bearing on the formation of the belief. So if underlying principle, if we see in all these cases, that reason to believe should be the subjective satisfaction with available documents, and it should not be used as a rubber stamp. Last one, this decision I would like to consider the deal with is in the case of Mohanlal Porwar by the Supreme Court, where it's very nicely worded. The circumstances have to be viewed from the experience of the officer who equipped to interpret the suspicious circumstances and form a reasonable belief in the light of the opposite circumstances, in the light of the said circumstances. While considering the question whether the officer concerned has a reasonable belief, the court cannot sit as an appellate forum and is for the authority to be satisfied prima facie. And once there is a prima facie material to justify the reasonable belief, the court has to accept this. Fact. So, in short, there should be subjective satisfaction. That's all for the purpose of the reason to believe. Now, if we go under the section 67 again for inspection, as I said, it should be in writing. It should be in the proper format, and the proper format prescribed. There's one common format whether you go for inspection or search or seizure. But inspection, there are different criteria has been prescribed under the format, because where the officer has marked tick over that particular entry, that has to be looked into it, whether it has been marked under section 67(1) or 67(2), whether in 67(7)(1) also whether the 7 or 8 criteria has been satisfied, has been prescribed, whether which criteria has not been met with, and therefore the officer has come for inspection, that has to be checked. Once this authorization is given, person come for inspection, and thereafter if they want to convert into the seizure, again authorization is to be seen, and 2, they can seize this material under the prescribed form called GST INS2. This INS2 either a seizure, those documents, books can be taken away with them under taken away with them, or it can be handed over to the assessee under INS03. Because when the officers find that it is not difficult to carry out the machines or materials or anything, they ask assessee not to part with these materials or documents and keep with you under the safe custody at your own cost under INS03. Kindly note that each of the documents are required to be mentioned documentation identification number, that means DIN. If document does not mention DIN, then you may consider it is an invalid document. You are not bound to give answer to any of this query, or you are not required to deal with that authorization also. In case if they say that DIN is not mentioned for ABC reason, then the reason is also required to be recorded, and documents should clearly mention that issued without DIN. Kindly note that, because we have come across that one of the matters pending in Gujarat High Court, that summons were issued. These summons were not mentioned DIN number, which is statutorily required to be mentioned. They even that did not mention that it is issued without DIN, and therefore it is a of obligation upon the authority to see that yes, it is a DIN is mentioned. If it is not mentioned, then reason has to be given. Now, section, as I said, that if the inspection has to be converted into the search, that can be done only in a case when the officer finds the goods are lying in the premises which are liable for confiscation. In which situation goods can be liable for confiscation? There are 4 circumstances which has been mentioned under section 130 where the goods can be confiscated or is liable for confiscation. If supply is made in contravention of the GST law with intent to evade the payment of tax. So the officer come to a premises, they find there are so many unaccounted stocks lying into the premises, and they know that it's unaccounted, and therefore the purpose of this goods lying into it to transfer it or clear it without payment of tax, and then in that situation 130 can be invoked. 2, goods are not accounted on which tax is liable to be paid. If goods are liable to pay tax are supplied without having any registration, if they come to the premises, they find that particular premise is not registered or contravene any of the provision with intent to evade of the tax, in that situation the goods can be definitely seized, and thereafter even can be seized, and yes, before that the seizure search procedure can be initiated. If the goods are not liable for confiscation under 130, then goods cannot be seized under the section 67(2). That means search cannot be initiated. Now, various litmus test has been there for section 67, because earlier in the Supreme Court one of the assessee challenged that provision itself. They say that this section 67 per se is unconstitutional. It was challenged before the Supreme Court under Article 32. High Court, Supreme Court did not entertain, and they say that ultimately let you go before the High Court. And no doubt thereafter this provision has not been challenged yet. It is there. It is still available, and there is no. I have not come across any petition where it is under challenge. Earlier, there is a section 105 of the Custom Act, which was also challenged in the Supreme Court. And the court observed that is 105 is again seizure under the Custom Act. And they say that the court observed that power under the section can be abused, but at the same time, they are also controlled by other means, which is by way of existence of a reasonable belief of the officers. Similar section 136(2), that is in the Custom Act for the prosecution and imprisonment, which provide the effective control over the abuse of the powers. So kindly note that under the Customs Act, the power has been given for carry out the search. The officer should not abuse this process of power, and therefore the prosecution has power for prosecution against the officer has been empowered, has been mentioned in the section 136. But such similar provision is not given under the GST Act. So since under GST such prosecution power is not given, and therefore it is required that yes, in case the officer malafidly acts or carry out the search, then without any one is a compensation that will be fine. But what are the other consequences? And that has to be specifically prescribed under the law. As I just mentioned that regarding the perishable material and hazardous material, the power has been given the officer not to wait till end of the 6 months. The proper officer can make the list for this perishable materials as well as this hazardous material, and it can be disposed of even before expiry of the 6 months. Kindly not under the under this GST. There is a particular notification which prescribes the type of goods which is considered as a perishable material, and specifically they covered this drugs and the chemical items. Similarly, agriculturist items and highly depreciated value, they have covered under these items. There is one more provision of section 67(11). As I said, under section 67(2), the department can seize the materials. They can seize this books of account and documents. But there is one independent provision of section 67(11), where the proper officer has been empowered to seize the books of accounts, documents, or registers. And in that situation, they can keep these books of account for invariable period of time, indefinite period of time, till the case is over or till the prosecution is over. So kindly note, if I can see only this provision, in case if the inspection is carried out in section 67(1), the officer does not have power to seize the materials or goods. The power is given only under the search. But under section 67(11), they can empower, the officer can go for the seizure of the books. And therefore, I can see only the test is required to be, it is required to be tested whether simultaneous provision can be invoked or simultaneous action can be taken, one under section 67(1) for inspection and simultaneous for section 67(11). That has to be examined, because we say that these both are absolutely independent provision. If inspection is carried out, then they have to furnish the formality of inspection. They can't invoke section 67(11). If the section 67(11) has to be invoked, then it is to be invoked absolutely in a separate manner. There is one more, there is a last provision under the inspection and search and seizure, section 67(12). This is a case where commissioner or any other officer who has been authorized, they can go to any shop or any place of the provider of the of the supply of the goods or services to identify whether this assessee comply with the provision for issuance of invoice or not. And if they satisfy yes that the officer visit the particular place and they satisfy that yes, ultimately the supplier raise the invoices of their supply of the goods or services. In that situation, the officer can return the material to the this supplier. Why this provision has been invoked? For the to ascertain that yes, ultimately any assessee he is satisfied with the basically complies with the provision, and they comply with all the rules and regulations, like for examination of the issues of the invoice and others. Only the criteria here is the whether the invoice is raised or not. But in case of there is a issue regarding classification or valuation, then section 6712 would not come into play. Now I can understand in case of the return of the goods, the supplier can raise the credit note and the goods can be returned and there is no requirement to make the payment. But this similar provision is not applicable in the case of the services, because once the invoice has been raised, then only the situation is that ultimately the tax has to be paid and refund can be sought, but and adjustment would not be possible. So this is the what we have spoken. I have spoken, that is in respect of the supply of goods in the case of the inspection, search and seizure. Now next topic is a payment under the protest, because as I said that once the search initiates, one of the situation where the officer force or tortures the assessor to make the payment. Now when you want to make the payment, then payment can be made under the protest. Under the excise law, earlier under the service tax, there was specific provision for allowing the assessee to make the payment under protest. But similar provision is not available under the GST. It is absent. So under what situation, how can you make payment under protest? One, when you file the DRC 03, there is a column 8. In column 8, you can very well mention that yes, this amount payment is made under the during the period of investigation. Now, what would help you by making the payment under protest? One, because if you make payment under DRC 03, it is considered as an accepted liability. But at least if you under column 8, where the other reasons is provided, if you mention it, it is considered as this amount is still under contest, and therefore obligation lie upon the officer to issue the show cause notice or to initiate the proceeding against you. Otherwise, they would consider case is concluded, you would not receive any notice, and after 5 years or 6 years you go for refund, they say that where you have mentioned that yes, amount is paid under the protest. 2, you are entitled to get a refund in case you have made the payment under protest if the amount is not transferred to the customers, and therefore it is always advisable to make payment under protest, and it is also advisable to make mention under the GDRC 03. There are different ruling available in this case, that if you make payment under protest, whether you are entitled for refund immediately after officers left your premises, or the refund can be sought only after investigation is over and no any case is booked against you. In case of this Nandi Dal Mills India Private Limited, the Madras High Court says that if the payment is made under the protest, if you prove that this payment has been deposited under coercion by force, then you are entitled for the refund. And this refund, the court has examined various factors and concluded the amount is to be returned to the assessor with the interest. But the same High Court, in the later case, in the case of Aditya Energy Holding, they say that no doubt the amount has been deposited after conclusion of investigation. If the officer finds that there is no case against you, the amount will be returned. Otherwise, it will be subject it will be outcome of the proceedings. The amount will be either deposited or adjusted. Similar situation arose in the case of Bhumi Associate, where the Gujarat High Court very well manner provided the guidelines. The Gujarat High Court said that if officer has come to the premises, the officer should not force the assessor to deposit the amount on the date of the search. Once the officer goes out from the premises, and thereafter only the amount can be deposited. And the guidelines which has been laid down by Gujarat High Court, just I read these guidelines and it would help in all this GST litigation, it says that no recovery in any mode by check, cash or payment or cash or payment or adjustment of input tax should be made on the date of search or inspection proceeding under section 67 of the CGST Act under any circumstances. If even assessee come forward to make voluntary payment by filing DRC 03, the assessee should be asked or advised to file such form on the next date after the end of such proceeding and after the officer of the visiting team have left the premises of the assessee. Facility of filing complaint or grievance after the end of such proceedings should be made available to the assessee if assessee was forced to make payment in any mode during the pendency of such proceedings. And lastly, says that if the grievance or complaint is filed by the assessee, an officer is found to have acted in defiance of the opposite direction, then strict discipline action should be initiated against the concerned officers. So, in Bhumi Associate, the Gujarat High Court very well way laid down the guidelines, and now as per these guidelines, there is no requirement to make the payment on the date of the search. Assessee can make payment only after search is over, and if there is any grievance or any complaint, it can be very well lodged immediately after this search, and that has to be and in case the complaint is lodged, then the officer has to, or the concerned officer has to act sincerely, and in case if there is a fine, if it is found that there is a defiance of this direction, then strict action should be taken up. In Jyoti Construction, there is another decision of Odisha High Court. They say that if any amount is deposited during the investigation, that has to be deposited only by way of the electronic cash ledger and not by way of the electronic credit ledger, for the reason that ultimately during the course of investigation, any amount is deposited that is not deposited against any tax, interest or penalty. It is just only the deposit, and therefore in terms of the column which is mentioned that it on the electronic ledger, it is to be adjusted against only the tax and not against the any other dues, and therefore they say that no, it should be only by way of the electronic cash ledger. That is another provisions. Now we go on the next slide regarding the summons and summons statement, arrest and the prosecutions. So you know that ultimately summons is a document where we find that means it is a investigation has been initiated, and I'm sure that being chartered accountant and lawyers, when someone is issued to the client would immediately come back to you and say that I would not be arrested. I'm sure that they want assurance from you. Now in that situation, what is obligation upon us to ascertain whether there is a proper summons, to what are the consequences of this summons. If we see, the power has been given to power under the CGST has been given to superintendent and any officer higher than that or superintendent for issuance of this summons. When the summons is being issued, it is obligation upon the person to whom the summons has been issued to give proper evidences and to give respect to the officers. In case if wrong information is given, then those action is liable for offense under section 193 of the IPC. If a person inserts or interrupt to the public servant, in that situation also he is liable for the provision of section 228 of the IPC. If person does not honor the summon, again he would be liable for prosecution under section 174 of the IPC, because once the application is filed, then either the person has to remain present before the magistrate and appear before the officer. In case if the officer does not appear and this assessee does not appear before the magistrate when this application is filed, the court may either issue bailable warrant, non-bailable warrant, and in case if it is not honored, again the officer would take support of the police officer and the person can be arrested. So I would always suggest that when the summon is issued, then as a being chartered accountant, our role should be that to understand the scope of the what is the scope of this summon. That is one. Two, what the activity is being undertaken by the assessee, and third, whether what are the non-compliance and whether that non-compliance culminate into arrest or not. That we have to look into it. Now, mode of services of the summons, that the summon can be issued sent by can be handed over in person. It can be sent by courier. It can be sent by registered. It can be sent to the address which is lastly known to the officer. Even it can be sent by the it can be sent. It can be uploaded over the portal also where the person is registered. And in case if the no address is known, then it can be affixed in conspicuous part of the office premises or this premises of the GST offices. Then normally there are decisions. The summons should not be issued to the highest officer of the company. First, they try to issue the summon to the authorized signatory or to the below the rank of the highest officers in the company. Because by issue summon to the highest officer, it is given the message that ultimately the person is involved in such a part and it gives the wrong messages. And therefore, in the case of this Sudhir Devra, the High Court said that the summon should not directly be issued to the highest officer. Similarly, in the case of Delhi High Court, in the case of Gail Gas also, they repeated that ultimately the summon to be issued to the person who has the knowledge of the matter. It should not be issued directly to the highest officer. But we have come across situation that many times, instead of issuing summon to the concerned person, MD, chairman, or highest officers are issued the summon to unnecessary to create chaos and to show that ultimately yes the person can deposit the amount, and for that purposes the summons are issued to the highest officers. The CBIC has issued the guidelines. The guidelines is very important, and therefore many times when the summons is issued to the highest officer, you can take these guidelines, you can take support of these guidelines and make appropriate reply. What is the guidelines? It says that it should be used as a when the summons is issued, it should be used as a last resort when assessor is not cooperating. So otherwise, if it is possible, just seek the information by of later, get the information, and if you find that the assessor is not cooperating, as a last resort, then summon can be issued. Language used in the summon should not be harsh and legal, which causes mental stress and embarrassment to the receiver. Prior written submission from an officer not below the rank of the assistant commissioner with reasons for issue summon to be recorded in writing. When written permission is not possible, oral or telephone permission from such officers should be obtained, and the same should be reduced to writing and intimated to the officer. Officers should submit a report on record or record a brief of proceeding in case of the proceeding, and submit the same to the officer who has been authorized for issuance of this summon. Senior management officials like CEO, CFO, or general manager or of a large company or public sector undertaking should not generally be issued at the first instance, except where they are involved in the decision-making process. So these are the guidelines that has to be strictly followed. Then there are some practical issues while issuing the summon. When summon are issued, it call for data to be submitted. I'm sure that you have seen the summon. In summon, two things are there. One, person issues summon to record his statement, and he is asked to produce come with all these data. While summon is issued, as a chartered accountant, we have to tell the client to at least understand whether the all compliance has been done or not. Two, what the document has been sought. If we furnish the document, then what sort of the next inquiry? That we have to at least forecast that based on the document, what the next steps should be taken up. We have to ascertain whether there is any liability of tax. Is there any wrong availment of the ITC? or there is any other contravention of the provision of the law. So we have to, as a being consultant or professional, we have to examine these documents, and thereafter, after satisfaction, yes, everything is in order, then the document has to be submitted. When someone is issued, to that time, the person whose statement is recorded, he has to be very careful that whatever the information he furnished, that is very accurate and it is not a wrong information, because wrong information multiplies the proceeding and therefore it is to be avoided. While recording this statement, it should be very clear, it should be voluntary and free from the pressures. Many times I've come across the situation when the person is called for recording the summon. He is called at 11 o'clock, but his statement would start recording at evening, or even it would not be recorded evening, he would be again called next day. So that type of pressure would always be built up, because they know that is a white collar criminal offenses, and therefore they can't misbehave with him, but they try to put pressurize in such a manner that ultimately the person would be pressurized and he starts saying the correct version. So that to put in this manner, the officers would always put pressure, not direct way, but indirect. But as a assessee, he should be kept in mind that my statement should be voluntary and should not be, it should be absolutely free from pressure. No doubt he has to bear this pressure. By giving the pressure or by taking the pressure, he should not say something which is not legally correct or which is not factually correct. He should stick to the operation of their management or operation of the company. He should be stick to that ultimately what the information he divulged, that is a correct information. Then statement made and signed by a person on appearance to respond to any summon issued under section 70 during the course of any inquiry or proceeding shall be relevant for the purpose of proving in any prosecution for an offense, because it is considered as an evidence. It is not like as or any statement is recorded before the police officer is not considered as an evidence, and therefore while recording statement before police officer, even they don't take your signature, but while recording the statement by the officer, they always take the signature, because it is considered as an evidence in a future. Always keep in mind that no intimidation or physical violence is happen. If it is done, the police complaint should be filed or proper recourse should be taken up. Next is the application of mind. While recording the statement, as I said, that it is considered as evidence, and therefore whatever the information is divulged, that is absolutely in a proper manner. The interrogation for prolonged and abrupt hours, normally law does not prescribe it, that it should say that ultimately that record statement should be recorded during office hours. But many circumstances we have seen that the record statement is recorded even after office hours also. It is for long working hours, and that should be avoided. And therefore, in the case of Agarwal Foundries, the court observed that this practice should not be adopted. Merely statement is not only the evidence, the officer required to corroborate those statements with the independent evidences also. And therefore, many times we have seen that if the statement is incorrectly recorded or it has been taken under the force of coercive, then immediately after completion of the statement, on the first availability opportunity, that statement should be retracted. When the statement is retracted, kindly note that it should not be stereotype retraction. The association should mention in detail under which circumstances we are retracting this statement, and they have to give the proper reason there. One question arises whether lawyer is permitted to remain present while recording the statement of a person. So there are two types of answer. One, many courts they say that yes, advocates should be allowed to remain present while recording a statement, but at a visible distance and not at an audible distance. There are decisions that ultimately it is not permissible while recording the statement. But there is a recent decision where it says that yes, advocates should be permitted to remain present at the place where the statement is recorded at the visible distance and not the audible distance. Now, last portion is regarding the arrest. See, in the which circumstances the person can be arrested. There are 4 instances where the person can be arrested. 1, he supplies any goods or services without supply of the invoices. 2, the assessee issues only the invoices or bill without supply of goods or without supply of the services. 3rd, the assessee awaits the input tax credit without receipt of the goods. And lastly, the assessee collects the amount of tax and not deposited with the central government. In these 4 instances, person can be arrested, subject to the amount involved in the case is more than 5 crore rupees. If that is so, then case becomes cognizable offense and is a non-bailable offense. In other words, even in 4 types of cases, the amount involved is less than 5 crore rupees. It is a non-cognizable offense and bailable offense. What does it mean of cognizable offense? Cognizable offense means the person can be arrested without warrant. Officer can call for the recording statement and person can be arrested. But in case of non-cognizable offense, the person will be arrested only after issuance of the warrant. Because in those cases, he would be immediately released on the bail because it's a bailable offense. When we say non-bailable means ultimately magistrate triable case, magistrate can give the bail. The officer does not have power to give you the bail. I'll give 2-3 examples in such cases because many persons has a misconception regarding arrest. Suppose, take an example, there is an evasion of tax of rupees 10 crores. The issue is regarding misclassification. Whether the person can be arrested? Answer is no. For the reason that the power has been given under the law, in 4 circumstances, person can be arrested. Barring these 4 circumstances, irrespective of the situation, person cannot be arrested. So again, I repeat, availment of credit without receipt of the goods or service, issuance of the invoice without supply of goods or services, or issue of invoices without supply of the goods, and last is a collect of duty or tax without and does not deposit with the exchequer. So if there is a question of the valuation, that you undervalued the goods, there is an evasion of tax of more than 5 crore. Whether person can be arrested? Answer is no. And therefore, kindly note that when there is no question of arrest, person should go for recording the statement. Let the officer record his statement, and I'm sure that once the person is out, then once the person's statement is recorded, he would be immediately asked to leave the place. Once the person is detained or arrested, then he should be presented before the magistrate within 24 hours. When person is arrested in non-cognizable offense and bailable, the bail, as I said, it would be granted by the officers. Now I have with this, you can see the table. In table, there are 2 circumstances when the offense is more than in the offense where the amount involved is more than 5 crore, the imprisonment is a 5 years with fine, and it is a cognizable and non-bailable offense. Similarly, in case the amount is more than 2 crores but less than 5 crore, the imprisonment is 3 years with 3 years imprisonment with fine and is a non-cognizable and bailable offense. Now there are some situations, just I'll narrate you. If you have seen in Gurgaon cases, the 2 chartered accountant cases, you have seen the arrest memo because it was highly circulated in among all the chartered accountant fraternity. If you see the arrest memo, in arrest memo, no reason was provided, no grounds was given, and for which type of offense he has been arrested, it has not been provided. there is a decision of DK Basu, wherein it says that the officer carrying out arrest should show clear and visible ID. Arrest memo should also be signed by witnesses and countersigned by the person arrested. The person shall have a right to inform to friend. Entry to be made in a diary. Examination of body of the arrested person as per request, and a physical injury must be recorded along with that. Medical examination and right of a arrested person to meet his lawyers. And one more regarding the grounds, because that is mentioned first. The ground should be mentioned, because if the ground is not mentioned, that means for what reason I have been arrested, I'm not sure. Even though while interrogation he has been informed, it is not enough. It is required to be reduced in the arrest memo. If arrest memo does not mention that yes, this is the ground I'm arresting you, it is not permissible, because no one knows whether he has been arrested for one, whether he has been arrested for two, or one or three of 132, or four of 134, 35. Because if you see that his arrest memo, it mentions all the provisions. Now, which offense has been committed, it is not mentioned there. And in that situation, it is considered illegal arrest. And once it is considered illegal arrest, then it has to be released immediately. It is not on bail also. When in the case of illegal arrest, person should be released without any bail bond and without any surety. See, then in case of Anish Kumar, Supreme Court decision, it says that when the offense period is less than 7 years, in that situation, arrest should be made in exceptional cases. Whether arrest is required or not, it can be decided whether person cooperate in the investigation, whether there is a chances that person would tamper with the evidences, third, whether he would not cooperate. In those circumstances, person can be arrested. That is mentioned in the Anish Kumar. The Supreme Court said that whether offense is a grave or serious or not, it can be decided based on the quantum of imprisonment. It cannot be decided based on the quantum of money involved in the offense. So assume for a minute, even though there is 100 crores of evasion of tax, but maximum imprisonment is not going to be happen for more than 5 years. In such situation, is a magistrate triable case. Offense is for less than 7 years, and therefore, in terms of Anish Kumar, he should not be arrested unless there are circumstances. If the person is not arrested, he would commit the similar type of offenses and it would prejudice to the society. In that situation, he should be arrested. Now, show us in many cases, the court says the person is arrested in the fake invoice cases. Person is arrested for other reason. Can we say is a very serious offense? One, two, serious offense will be decided based on the quantum of imprisonment. If it is so serious, then the quantum of imprisonment would not be 5 years. It would be 7 years, 10 years, 15 years, 14 years. Because like in murder cases, it is a life imprisonment. In the case of the tampering the government securities, it is an offense of 10 years. In case of the cheating, it is a 7 years. Earlier in the excise and service tax, the imprisonment was 7 years, which has been reduced now to 5 years. So why it has been reduced to 5 years? Because they find that ultimately it is not so grave or serious cases. Lastly is a prosecution. So in before let me go into prosecution, I want to just narrate the story of this arrest also again. When person is arrested, he has to be produced before the magistrate within 24 hours. We have come across situation, the person is detained and he has been shown arrest after 2 or 3 days. Can we say it's an illegal arrest? Answer is yes. Because Article 21, it says that, sorry, 22 says that the person should be produced before magistrate within 24 hours of detention or arrest. It does not talk about only the arrest. Two, when a person is produced before magistrate, magistrate normally asks the question to the person whether officer has misbehaved you, whether they physically tortured you, whether they mentally tortured you or not. Many times, because of the XY reason, the person who has been arrested or accused gives a wrong statement. I would always suggest that ultimately that accused should make statement before the officer, before the magistrate, so that ultimately it will be recorded, and this would help in the future litigations. Because this criminal arrest, it should not go for a longer time. But the implication of it, if you are given inculpatory statement, you admitted the liability, it would hamper your future investigation. And therefore, it is always advisable to retract your statement before magistrate, and it will be more evidently valid. Third, if normally if the remand is sought, then you can't file bail application during that time. Once remand is over, then bail application can be filed. And as I said, that if person accepts a person deposit or shows some deposit, so voluntary deposit some amount, then chances to get bail is very high. In otherwise, the chances to get bail either from sessions and high court is a higher. But because magistrate normally doesn't grant, in normal circumstances, doesn't grant the bail. So ultimately bail is rejected, then go to sessions court, and then high court if it is again rejected. Kindly note, in case of criminal bail is person is arrested does not mean the prosecution is started. Prosecution will start only after filing of the complaint with the magistrate with the consent of the commissioner. Because while regarding filing of the prosecution or complaint, permission of the commissioner is a must. If no permission is given, prosecution cannot be launched. So merely person is arrested does not mean that prosecution is launched. It's an absolutely different aspect. Two, no time limit is prescribed under the law for initiation of the prosecution. But under the 468 of the CRPC, which is applicable under the to the GST for the purpose of arrest and for other purposes, they say that if there is a case of only of the fine, then time limit of for launching prosecution is 6 months. If imprisonment for 1 year, then limitation is 1 year. In imprisonment is exceeding 1 year to 3 years, then prosecution should be launched in the 3 years. In case of GST, the imprisonment is of 5 years for the offenses committed of more than ₹5 crore. No time limit is provided for launching the prosecution. So in those cases, even the commissioner can launch prosecution after 5 years also, 10 years also. We have come across in excise and service tax and customs, the prosecution has been invoked after the tribunal decided the matter on merit. No any procedure has been prescribed, like issuance of the so-called notice before initiation of the prosecution. But normally it happens that before initiation of the prosecution, the commissioner sends the letter to the assessee that yes, we are going to launch prosecution against you, whether you would like to compound the offense or not, because it is a compoundable offense, and therefore therefore they give you the opportunity. And how the case can be compounded? If any assessee wants to compound their offense, they can very well file application before the concerned commissioner. While compounding the offense, he has to deposit the entire amount of the tax, interest, and penalty. Over and above, for fees for the compounding offense is very exorbitant. It says a minimum 10,000 rupees or 50,000 of the tax involved in the matter, whichever is higher. So this is the minimum side, and maximum side is a 150 of the tax amount. So if assessee is willing to go for compounding of the offense, he has to deposit. He has to be mentally ready to pay the compounding fee, which is equal to 50% of tax amount. That is minimum. and maximum would be 150% of the amount. Once the application is filed, the commissioner would decide whether he should be permitted for compounding of the offense or not. Once the offense is compounded, then he would not be any case would be booked against him, and he would be relieved from the prosecutions. But compounding of offenses would not be permitted if the person has already been allowed compounded once earlier, or who has been allowed compounded once other than in clause A of 132(1). That means issues of invoices without receipt of the without supply of the goods, or person accused committing of an offense which is also offense under other law, person convicted for offense, then person accused of committed of the offense as specified under 132(1) G, J, and K, and any other person as may be prescribed. So in those cases, the offense cannot be compounded. Similarly, if offense has been committed by the company, in that situation, not only the company but directors and all other officers who were at the relevant time involved in the so-called offense are liable for the for this prosecution, or liable for these offenses of the company. Similarly, in the case of company partnership firm or LLP or HUF, partner, karta, or managing trustee would be equally responsible for the offenses of the company. So I just conclude my speech here on respect of this search, seizure, and arrest provision. So I'll just raise, if anyone has any query, please let us know. Anyone has any query?
Sir, members, are you having any queries? Or you want any clarifications? Sir Vinay garu, do you have any clarification? You want to clarify anything? You want any clarification, sir? Vinay garu? विकास जैन आप बोल सकते हैं ना?
So regarding the recent Gurgaon case.
Sir, one query is there, sir, wrongful detention or arrest. What is the accountability, sir?
Sorry, wrongful detention of
or arrest.
Arrest. What is the accountability of the officers?
See, in accountability of the officer, as I said earlier, under the customs, the specific provision was given that ultimately he would be circumvented with the prosecution, but similar provision is absent under the GST. So in case of the illegal arrest, there are two possibilities, and that is again at the discretion of the High Court. Because who would decide whether it is an illegal arrest or not? It can be decided by the High Court only. Yes, it is an illegal arrest. So in those cases, many times the court asks the board to take appropriate action against the officer. That is one. Two, many times they may invoke a contempt proceeding against the person, because in Ernest Kumar decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Ernest Kumar as well as DK Basu, they provided the guidelines. What the guidelines has to be followed for arrest a person. Similarly, in which situation person should be arrested. So section 132 read with section 69 of the CGST Act provides under which circumstances the person can be arrested. In support of that, DK Basu decision of the Supreme Court as well as Ernest Kumar, they provided the mechanism. If any officer has violated the procedure, then High Court can suo moto initiate contempt proceeding against this officer, and whatever the imprisonment and what are the consequences, it can be followed simultaneously.
I have a query. In case of your search, the initial time limit to issue the order is 6 months, right?
Yes.
So just in case, like, during the search, there is a stock variation or something which is found out, and the
Yes.
officer doesn't issue any show cause notice or any order within the 6 months, can he later come back and say that, this is something which is apparent during the search we found out, and, you have to pay taxes or whatever, the other legal implications of it?
Yes. Yes, it's a nice question. So see, at the time of search, if there is a comparison and they found something and if they seize the material, then time limit of 6 months is started. Otherwise, if they did not seize any material at the relevant time, then time limit of 6 months will not be applicable. Once the time limit is 6 months is applicable, take an example, there is a seizure and time limit of 6 months is applicable. The action has to be initiated within 6 months, or the commissioner has to grant extension for maximum up to 6 months. Within a year, if nothing is done, then you can very well use that material without any interruption. But question arises, does it mean that you are absolved from the responsibility in case of for payment of tax, interest and penalty if it is proved that yes, there was a difference between there is a difference in the stocks, or there is a contravention of provision of the CGST Act? Answer is no. Only the relief is given that stock can be released without furnishing any bonds, surety and security. Simultaneously, in future, redemption fine would not be imposed on that material because there is no confiscation of that material. But whatever other consequences like liability of interest, tax, interest and penalty, that would be independently followed.
So for that, he has to again issue a different show cause notice, or the initial one, where they have given you the panchnama and that thing will vary, or a separate, altogether a separate procedure needs to be followed by department by issuing a separate show cause.
Yes, you are right. The separate notice has to be issued. The notice either would be issued under section 130 read with section 122 with section 73 or 74.
Okay, thank you.
So cause notice will be issued. So cause notice will be issued. Panchnama is not considered as a notice because you will be called upon to so cause as to why this to confiscate or seize this material because of the XYZ reasons.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
Sir, in case of perishable goods, the seizure goods should be released within 6 months. Is it not, sir?
Yeah, in perishable material, there is separate provision. They say that even it is not required to be waited for 6 months, because in case of perishable material, the opportunity is given to the owner to clear the goods immediately upon making the payment of market value of the goods or tax, interest or penalty involved in the material, whichever is less. So that the opportunity is given to the owner. Suppose owner doesn't want to exercise that option. In that situation, the officer can auction this material and whatever the value is received, that would be adjusted against the liability.
Okay, sir. When the inspection is not completed and it is continuing, in the meantime, this market values come down, then what would be the procedure, sir? What would be paid of the?
Yeah. So, see, market value has to be seen on the date of the release. So today, suppose because these goods are lying in your factory or in your place for 6 months, but on the date there is a date of seizure one, and another date when you apply on the date when they order for release of the goods. So on the date of release of the goods, if market value has been reduced, and you prove that today the value of this material is A, B, C or X value, then you can pay the value of that market value, because rule 141, I think market value, it says that where the goods or things are of perishable or hazardous nature, and if taxable person pays the amount equivalent to market price of such goods or things, or the amount of tax, interest, penalty that is or may become payable by taxable person, whichever is lower, such goods or, as the case may be, things shall be released forthwith. So on the date of release, what is the market value that will be taken up?
I have one more query. Now, the Panchnama which has happened during a search, let's say, can it be contested at any point of time? Say, for an example, to take a stock of a business of an entity, let's say it takes almost 2 to 3 days, depending upon the number of quantities or the item mix which they have. But the department completes in a day randomly or whatever. So, basically when the Panchnama is done, the department somehow forces to, sign whatever is mentioned over there. And the SSC signs at that point of time. Later, can he contest saying that, this Panchnama does not contain all the details of the stock and all those things, or how is it?
Yeah, correct. There's in many times happen such incident. We always advise the client that you come to know malpractice or discrepancies of the Panchnama immediately at the time recording of the Panchnama. So you have two options. One, while recording the Panchnama, while drawing the Panchnama, you should raise objection. You should not sign the statement first, because in Panchnama, even the person from the company has to sign on each of the page. So he has to put his qualification, or he has to at least put his objections. That is one. Many times it happens that it would be very difficult to put a protest or put objection at the time because of the threat of the officers of arrest or ABC reasons. In that situation, once the officer leaves the premises, thereafter, immediately on the first opportunity, he should narrate entire thing in the letter and address this letter to the concerned department. That is second possibility. Assume for a minute, even second possibility is also not possible, for the reason because you put objections, and thereafter immediately thereafter that ultimately if I put this objection, there are more chances of arrest or some other reasons of coercive actions. In that situation, you have to prove your case while filing the reply, that how it is not possible to measure the stock in short period of time. Two, whether the panchas were available or not. Who were the panchas? Many times it happened that normally officers brought panchas and they signed the panchas signed wherever these officers say. So in those circumstances, you have to prove in the reply. If you ask me, my fair opinion should be that on the date when while Panchnama is drawing, at that time the person should put his objection. Alternately, immediately first availability opportunity, the objection should be raised. Otherwise, it will be too late, because many times it happen in litigation that when we put this type of grievance in the reply, they said, why did you not put this grievance at the time of drawing the Panchnama or immediately thereafter? Our case becomes weak.
So immediately thereafter, you mean when he gives us an opportunity to reply, or the day they left, we can reply saying that we discontent with your.
Correct. You should immediately, without me, so even though officer doesn't call you, but immediately officers leave the premises, the assessee should write a letter and put it objections.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any other members are having any doubts or any clarification required? So really, we are very grateful to you, sir, Hardik Modh garu, that you have
Thank you, sir.
spared your valuable time. Really, thank you very much. Now I request our Secretary, sir, Anil Paul, sir, to propose vote of thanks.
A very good evening to all the members. We've just come to the end of a very interesting second session of the week-long legal SAPTAH. On behalf of the managing committee of the branch and the members of the branch, I would really like to thank the learned speaker of today's evening session, Sri Hardik Modh ji, for his very lucid presentation and a very informative and detailed procedural aspects disclosure, as well as a detailed explanation by referring to these sections and the provisions of the law. We thank you very much, sir, for your patient presentation, as well as to attend to the queries of the members. I am sure that the matter of search and seizure, as well as the inspection, is a significant one that has been in the minds of the members of late. I thank you very much, sir, for having spent your time. For the information of the members, tomorrow the session will be on demand and recovery under GST, and we hope we'll have similar encouraging presence of all the members. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. I'll take permission to leave now.
Thank you, sir.